It's pretty common knowledge that Seiko's 5 range of watches offer a great entry into mechanical watches for someone starting their journey. However, it's not limited to newbies. Seasoned collectors can also really appreciate these unassuming watches. With so many different models and designs, there's always something to catch your eye. In this case, 2 of them. Welcome to Addicted to Watches. Today, we're looking at not just one, but 2 Seiko 5 watches. One we've kind of seen on the channel before, but in a different color variation. However, both of these 2 watches here share quite a few similarities. They're both simple, straightforward, slightly smaller integrated bracelet watches. However, one is definitely a bit more everyday than the other. These are the Seiko 5 SKX195 and SNKC76. I'll leave it up to you to decide which is more everyday and which one is a bit more eye-catching. But what you can't argue is that they are both 2 very good looking watches. In a previous video, we looked at the SNKC77, which is the black and gilt dialed version of this. At the end of that video, I said that because they're so uncommon and such well-balanced designs, if you see one you should jump on it. So, in a way, this is me putting my money where my mouth is. It's definitely a bit different to the style of watch I usually go for, being in all gold, but there is a certain enjoyment I get out of the gaudiness of it that kind of does make me feel like $1,000,000 whenever I wear it. I guess you could call it the budget alternative to the Vacheron 222. If the SNKC is a budget, albeit difficult to find, alternative to the 222, then this SKX is probably an equally difficult to find alternative to the recent IWC Ingenieur. It shares the integrated bracelet design, as well as those 6 dots around the bezel. The dial is also a bit similar, but still different. Either way, it's a pretty typical Seiko 5 dial. It's simple, it's legible, and it's pretty unoffensive. It's got the look of the IWC, but still manages to infuse a bit of its own personality. So, instead of going into too much detail about these watches like I would normally do, I thought it might be fun to just talk about why I like them. The first part is definitely the size. The case size and shoulder size of the lugs are especially important when it comes to watches with an integrated bracelet. Looking at a popular watch like the PRX, it comes in 2 sizes. 35 and 40 millimeters. I've tried both on, and I didn't really like the way that either fit. The 40 millimeters felt too big, and the 35 felt too small. A lot of it comes down to the case size, and the bracelet width when it leaves the case. On the 40 millimeter, the bracelet is quite wide at the case, which contributes a lot to that bigger feeling. Conversely, the 35 does the opposite, and the bracelet on that makes it feel much smaller. Coming back to the Seikos in front of us, the SKX is actually that same 35mm case size, but it feels much better on wrist. It's got the right amount of presence, and that is thanks to the bracelet. When it leaves the case, it is actually 22mm before quickly tapering down to 16. That initial width does a lot more than you might think for the feeling of the watch. The SNKC similarly has a 22mm bracelet width, but this time the case is 36mm, so has slightly more presence on wrist too. But let's be honest, with all that gold it probably doesn't need it. And that leads nicely into another thing to talk about. Fun. In general, Seiko 5 watches are just fun. This all gold SNKC is more or less the complete opposite of my normal taste in watches. I usually go for more subtle, understated watches, but this one just throws all that out the window. And to be honest, that's kind of why I like it. It's just fun to wear something so different and outlandish. It's refreshing. It's good to have a well-resolved taste and sense of style in your watch collection, but it can also be a good thing to have something different that makes you smile when you wear it. This Seiko is just a bit of light-hearted fun that doesn't take itself too seriously. It's all too easy in this hobby to get bogged down in specs, movements, finishing, brand history, and so many other things. Sometimes I think that people forget to think about how the watch actually makes you feel. Is it fun to wear, or does it just make you feel good because it's rare or expensive? If that's what you want for a watch, then that's fine for you. But in my opinion, a hobby is something you do or you have for enjoyment and to have fun. Sometimes it just takes a relatively cheap, all-gold Seiko 5 watch to remind you of that. The last thing I wanted to talk about is something related to what I just did. That is, you don't necessarily need to spend a lot of money on a watch to really enjoy it. When these were available, they were definitely budget watches, and even now when I come across them for sale, they aren't particularly expensive. Even so, I've had a lot of fun with them. In the same way that I feel people sometimes get too wrapped up and forget to have fun, I think people sometimes are told or convince themselves that they need to have a more expensive watch to get that same enjoyment out of it. Of course, I may be guilty of that myself considering my Grand Seikos, but it's not a prerequisite to having fun and really appreciating watches. Being perfectly content and happy with watches from a lower price point like these is something we could all probably benefit from trying to do. Hopefully, while I've been droning on about all of this, I've had some shots of the watches to also give you a bit of an idea about them, and make it overall a bit more bearable to watch. I just think that both of these Seiko 5 watches can really represent some good ideals that we can aspire to. Of course, it's much easier to find enjoyment and appreciation in a watch when it looks as good as these both do. That was a bit of a different kind of video to my normal ones, so if you've made it all the way to the end here, thanks for listening. What do you think about these watches? Do you have a Seiko 5 in your collection? Am I just talking nonsense? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time.